Here's the biggest lie about scrolling, that every swipe is a decision. Open the app, decision, swipe again, decision. By the time you put the phone down, it looks like you made 200 choices in a row, back to back, like a machine gun of free will. You made one. Here it is. It's 9 p.m., you're in bed, and you think, I'll check TikTok for a minute. That's a real decision. You weighed it, however lazily, against sleeping, against reading, against doing nothing at all, and you chose it. Everything that happens after that sentence isn't a new decision. It's the consequence of the first one, still running in the background like an engine you forgot to switch off. You look up and it's 11:47. Nobody decided that. There was no moment anywhere in those 2 hours and 47 minutes where you sat with the choice to keep going and consciously said yes again. The minute just kept being now over and over until it quietly stopped being a minute and became most of your night. You're not unusual for this. It happens to almost everyone who opens one of these apps on the same interface, built the same way, without a single one of them consciously choosing every step of it. So if you weren't deciding, what happened to the 200 choices you thought you were making the whole time? Picture an airport, not the gate, the long hallway before it, the one with the moving walkway. You step on, that's a decision, a small physical one. Lift a foot, trust your weight to a moving belt instead of solid ground under you. But once you're on, you don't decide to keep moving. The belt does that now. You can walk faster if you want. You can even walk backward for a laugh and go nowhere. But the baseline forward motion isn't coming from you anymore. It's coming from the machine underneath you, and it never once checks in to ask if you're still on board with the plan. The only announcement it ever makes is to hold the handrail, and even that isn't phrased as a question. Nobody's ever had a moving walkway crisis of conscience. Nobody stops at the halfway mark and asks themselves whether they actually still want to arrive at the other end. The walkway doesn't leave room for that question to even form. That's not a flaw in the design. That's the entire design. Your phone runs on the same idea, except the walkway is the interface itself, and nobody had to build a belt from scratch. They just had to remove everything that used to make you stop, one wall at a time, until there weren't any left to trip over. Think about what watching television used to require, back when a show had actual edges. An episode ends. The screen holds on credits or static or a countdown to whatever a network scheduler decided you'd want to see at exactly that hour on a Tuesday. Every one of those was a wall, a small forced pause, where the only way to keep going was for you to personally do something about it. Get up, cross the room, change the channel, put in the next tape. Even a DVD used to stop and ask right there on the menu screen whether you actually wanted the next episode before it would play one. What happens when a system gets built with none of those walls left standing? Around 2006, a designer named Asa Raskin is widely credited with building a feature that let a page keep loading new content underneath whatever you were already reading, so you'd never technically reach the bottom of anything again. He said publicly more than once that he regrets it, not because it broke, because it worked exactly the way it was supposed to. Every spot where you might have naturally paused got quietly paved over with more floor, and the idea spread to almost everything with a feed. It's such a standard piece of every app you touch now that most people have never once noticed it was a choice somebody made, let alone one he now says he'd take back. You've probably heard the dopamine explanation for all this by now. Every article about phones eventually gets there, like it's contractually required to. And sure, your brain's reward system is doing something in the background while you scroll. That part's genuinely real. Nobody's denying the chemistry exists. It's a tidy explanation too, since it points at a chemical instead of at a specific decision somebody got paid to make. But dopamine alone doesn't explain why you'll keep scrolling through content you don't even like, content that's actively boring you. Missing walls do that job perfectly well on their own, with no chemistry required to finish the explanation. You might be thinking, okay, but I'm still moving my thumb. Somebody has to be deciding that, at least. Fair point. Your thumb is doing something. It's just not doing what you assume it's doing. The first swipe is a real decision. You're actually weighing what's in front of you, judging whether it's worth another few seconds. By the 10th swipe, that exact same motion is running on procedure instead of judgment. You've repeated it so many times in such quick succession that your hand has essentially been handed the keys and told to keep the car moving. That's not a metaphor for weakness, and it's not a character flaw. It's just what repetition does to any motion. Ask anyone who's driven the same commute so many times, they arrive at work with no real memory of the drive itself. Psychologists have a name for that shift, from a decision you're actively making to a pattern that's just running on its own. The difference between controlled and automatic processing. The swipe crosses that line faster than almost anything else ever designed for a thumb. So here's the actual shape of the thing. One evaluated decision right at the very top. Then a long stretch with the stopping cues surgically removed, so the automatic motion never meets a wall to check itself against. That structure, not your willpower, not a chemical, the structure itself, is what a designer would call decision architecture. Not the decisions you're making, but the shape of the space that decides how many decisions you're even offered in the first place. Once that shape exists, it doesn't have to convince you again. It only ever had to convince you once, right at the door. Why does knowing that matter more than just knowing the trick? Because it tells you exactly where to fight back, and it's almost never where people actually try to fight. Trying to out-willpower a moving walkway at swipe 400 is a losing game before it even starts. You're up against a machine built specifically to not need your input anymore, and it will win that fight almost every time because it was never designed to be a fair one. The only point where your decision-making was ever actually online this whole time was the very start, before the walkway. That's the only wall that was ever real, which makes it the only one actually worth rebuilding. That might mean the app doesn't get to live one tap from your home screen anymore. It might mean turning off the setting that starts the next thing before you've agreed to it, so a real gap opens up where a decision used to happen. It might even mean the charger lives somewhere that isn't arm's reach from the bed, so picking the phone up at all has to survive you actually getting up first. Small, almost boring changes, and they work anyway, for a boring reason. You've stopped relying on catching yourself mid-momentum, which almost never works, and started moving the one decision that was ever real back to a spot where it still gets made. Actually, this video has been doing the exact same thing. You didn't stop after every sentence to decide whether it was worth hearing the next one. You decided, somewhere near the beginning, that it was worth sticking around, and momentum did the rest. There were never 200 decisions. Not on the walkway, not in the feed, not here. There was only ever the one, right at the start, doing all of the actual work. The lie was never that scrolling feels automatic. The lie was that it was ever anything else.